The grand hall of the alien sovereign shimmered with golden light, cast from chandeliers made of living crystal that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Beneath them stretched a table longer than any Earth banquet could ever justify, laden with dishes that breathed steam and shimmered with impossible colors. At one end sat Captain Rian Holt, the first human to dine in the palace of the Veery Dominion. His reflection wavered in a goblet of amber fluid as he tried to remember how exactly his diplomatic mission had turned into dinner with an empress. The air was thick with warmth and tension, a heady mix of alien perfumes and political danger. When he'd made the joke, half nerves, half bravado, he hadn't expected her to stop breathing. Yet she did, crystal crown catching the light, her pale blue lips parting with a phrase that felt like a door sealing shut. "Then I agree." The words still echoed, and Rian could almost hear them resonating through his bones, like a tuning fork struck by fate. Across from him, the alien sovereign studied him with eyes the color of molten silver, unblinking and impossibly deep. Her fingers, adorned with spined rings that seemed grown rather than forged, curled around her goblet as though it contained her composure. He wondered what her people, these beings who had conquered 3 galaxies, saw when they looked at a human soldier with too many scars and too much stubborn humor. He'd said it to break the ice to make her smile. Instead, he'd found himself shackled to something sacred. His translator implant hadn't malfunctioned. The phrase she'd used was legally binding in her culture, an acceptance vow between rulers and consorts. The guards behind her had stiffened. The hall's murmurs had stopped. He had made a cosmic mistake with one careless jest. The sovereign, her name was Salith, though he'd only dared to use it once, set her goblet down gently, as if the motion itself carried ceremony. "Do humans always propose so casually?" she asked, her tone soft but slicing. Her voice had a resonance like vibrating glass, melodious yet commanding. "Or is this humor, as your species defines it?" Rian tried to find words. His mind, trained for negotiations, battles, and logistics, faltered under the weight of her stare. "It was humor, Your Majesty," he managed, his voice rasping against the dryness in his throat. "A joke." She tilted her head, silver braids brushing her armored shoulders. "Joke," she repeated slowly, as though tasting the word. A binding declaration cloaked in levity. Curious, dangerous. The corner of her mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like the suggestion of one. "Perhaps that is why your kind has survived despite such fragility." Around them, attendants moved like whispers, clearing plates and refilling cups without daring to meet their sovereign's eyes. Ryan's instinct screamed to apologize, to retract, but something in her gaze froze him. There was no wrath, only intrigue, sharp and deliberate. "If this is a misunderstanding," he said carefully, "I can correct it." The alien queen leaned forward slightly, the crystalline crown catching faint reflections of candlelight. "Can you?" she asked. "In our law, an acceptance is witnessed by the court of breath. The moment I spoke, the vow sealed in sound and air. To break it would be to dishonor my throne." Her words pressed against him like a physical weight. "However," her tone softened, "humans are known for adaptability. Perhaps you may yet redefine what such a vow means." Her eyes lingered on his trembling hand as he reached for his glass, pretending confidence. "Eat, Captain Holt. The meal grows cold, and tomorrow we shall see what kind of husband the stars have gifted me." He had faced death before, in zero-gravity combat, in the collapse of orbital stations. But this, he thought, was something new. As he forced down a bite of iridescent fruit that tingled like static, his mind raced through possible exits, none good. The Veery were an empire of tradition, their monarchs divine descendants of their world's first breath. A broken vow here could spiral into galactic insult, undoing years of diplomacy. Yet the glint in her eyes told him she was testing him, measuring his reaction. She wanted to see whether humans trembled or adapted. "If the stars gifted me," he said with a tight smile, "they must have a strange sense of humor." Her laugh, low and melodic, rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "Indeed, Captain Holt. Perhaps humor is the weapon your species wields best." Later, when the hall emptied, Ryan found himself escorted through corridors lined with living murals, walls that pulsed faintly, recording the presence of those who walked by. Each figure painted in motion, each face turning toward him as he passed. His escort, A silent, tall figure with obsidian armor stopped at a chamber door carved with spirals of light. "The consort's quarters," the guard said tonelessly. "Prepared as per custom." Ryan almost laughed. "I'll find a way to be grateful." Alone, he entered the room, heart hammering. The air shimmered faintly, filled with an ozone scent. The bed looked like a carved nebula, soft and shimmering. On a nearby table sat a crystal orb, projecting faint blue patterns. His diplomatic communicator repurposed into an ornament. Salith had anticipated everything. He sank into a chair and rubbed his temples, muttering, "Congratulations, Ryan. You just married the most dangerous woman in the universe." Sleep came in fragments, filled with dreams of silver eyes and whispered promises. When dawn broke, a phenomenon simulated by the palace's orbiting mirrors, the light scattered across the walls, forming the sigil of her lineage. Ryan woke to the sound of a door sliding open. Salith entered unaccompanied, her armor replaced by flowing metallic silk. "You look troubled," she said. "Most consorts are pleased by comfort." "Most consorts probably meant it," he replied before he could stop himself. She regarded him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Perhaps meaning is something that can grow." He couldn't tell if it was kindness or strategy. "You could end this," he said. "Say it was a misunderstanding." She moved closer, the faint scent of ozone following her. "And let your people believe their envoy broke a sacred bond before my entire court." "No, Captain. I think not. But perhaps you can learn what it means to stand beside me." He stared up at her, trying to read the intent behind her composure. She was terrifyingly beautiful, her presence magnetic. Yet behind the poise, he sensed something deeper, a loneliness so profound it bled through the perfection of her posture. "You want an equal," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward him, startled by the precision of the guess. "Not a servant, not a symbol." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Then slowly she nodded. "Your kind reads hearts as if they are open books," she murmured. "Perhaps that is your true weapon." The words settled between them, fragile yet binding. Ryan didn't yet know what being a husband to an alien sovereign entailed. But as she turned toward the great windows showing 1,000 stars, he thought, perhaps humanity's survival had always depended on saying the wrong thing at the right time. The palace felt different by the second morning, alive in a way Ryan hadn't noticed before, as if it were aware of him. When he stepped into the main corridor, the walls rippled faintly, echoing the rhythm of his heartbeat. Salith's people believed their structures were sentient extensions of their planet, semi-living repositories of memory. Each shimmer, each pulse of color along the corridor seemed to observe him, whispering silently to the Queen through invisible frequencies. He wasn't sure if it was paranoia or truth, but either way the thought made his skin prickle. A human diplomat caught in a marriage forged by a joke wasn't supposed to survive long in a civilization that turned architecture into witnesses. Breakfast, if the Veri even used such a concept, he found Salith already waiting at a smaller table carved from translucent stone. Sunlight, or a perfect imitation, spilled through the arched windows. Her armor was replaced by woven metallic strands that clung like moonlight to her skin. Ryan hesitated before sitting across from her. "So you dream loud," she said without looking up, slicing into a fruit that shimmered like opal. The statement wasn't a question. "Do your kind always think so desperately in sleep?" He blinked, halfway through a polite reply before realizing she might mean it literally. "You can read dreams?" She finally met his eyes. "I can read sound. Your mind hums with it. Grief, humor, fear, all frequencies of the same fragile melody." He exhaled. "I suppose that's better than silence." She smiled faintly. "Perhaps. Silence is the sound of gods. Mortals cannot bear it." They ate in near quiet, save for the faint hum of crystalline utensils and distant songbirds, artificial, he assumed, programmed into the palace's ecosystem. Ryan had learned early in diplomacy that silence was never empty. It was a battlefield of implications. "So," he began carefully, "what happens next? I assume there's some ritual I should know about?" She set her utensils down and regarded him with an expression between amusement and curiosity. "You speak as though awaiting execution." "Not execution," he said, "just political combustion." Her gaze softened. "You think too narrowly, Captain. A vow is not merely a political chain. Among my people, it is an experiment of spirit. To bond across species is to test the architecture of empathy. The phrase struck him. Empathy is architecture. Everything that endures is built, she said, lifting her glass. Even hearts. Her words lingered in his mind long after breakfast ended. Later, an attendant led him to the Grand Council chamber, an amphitheater of light suspended over what seemed like an endless void. Hundreds of very nobles filled the ascending tiers, their faces masked by ceremonial veils. The air vibrated faintly with a telepathic undertone, a whispering language of thought Ryan could only half perceive. Salith stood at the center, luminous and calm, her presence commanding without effort. "People of the Dominion," she declared, her voice magnified through the chamber's organic acoustics. "A bond has been spoken under witness of breath and sound. The vow of Salith and the human emissary Holt is sealed." A susurration rippled through the crowd like wind over water. Ryan's translator implant flickered, struggling to interpret overlapping languages. He caught fragments: impossible, sacrilege, hope. Then silence fell again. "Human," Salith said, turning to him. "Step forward." He did, his boots echoing against the platform. The stares of hundreds of beings burned into his back. "Do you accept the covenant of unity?" she asked, her tone formal but tinged with a hint of challenge. He hesitated, heart pounding. Refusal might mean war. Acceptance might mean something far stranger. "If it means peace between our worlds," he said, "then yes." The chamber erupted, not in cheers but a collective intake of breath, the kind that precedes storms. Salith smiled, faintly triumphant. "Then so it is written. The first interspecies covenant of equal breath." She stepped close enough that he could see the faint shimmer beneath her skin, like constellations shifting. "You have changed the record of stars, Captain Holt. For better or worse?" he murmured. "For both," she replied. After the ceremony, Salith led him through a side passage that curved upward, opening into a garden suspended in vacuum, a glass dome holding alien flora that glowed softly. Petals the size of hands drifted in slow air currents. "My ancestors believed gardens to be microcosms of consciousness," she said, trailing her fingers over a vine that recoiled and then relaxed at her touch. Every bloom a thought, every root a memory. When two species meet, their roots entangle. Ryan crouched beside a pool of still water. His reflection wavered beside hers, twin forms framed by alien stars. "So you don't seem angry," he said finally. "Most rulers would be." "Anger is a mortal luxury," she said. "I am older than wrath," her voice lowered. "But curiosity, that is eternal." For the next few cycles, Ryan found himself shadowing her through daily affairs. Council hearings, military parades, strange rituals of light, where the Veiri communicated through patterns rather than words. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. Some nobles bowed deeply. Others turned away in silent protest. Yet Salith remained unbothered, using his presence as both shield and provocation. When he asked her why, she replied, "To test how far my people's faith bends before it breaks." One evening, after a long day of ceremonial appearances, they returned to the private observatory, overlooking the palace's orbiting moons. The chamber was dim except for the projection of galaxies spinning slowly overhead. "Your kind builds ships that imitate stars," she said. "Yet you never ask whether the stars wish to be imitated." "Maybe imitation is our way of reaching them," he replied. "Maybe it's our version of prayer." She looked at him then, truly looked, and something softened behind the regal veneer. "Prayer," she echoed quietly. "My people abandoned gods when we learned to build them." "And did it make you happier?" he asked. "No," she said, "but it made us honest." They stood there, silence stretching, the distance between them shrinking not through command but recognition. For the first time, Ryan thought he glimpsed not an empress but a woman burdened by eternity, longing for someone who could surprise her. He realized then why she hadn't reversed the vow. To her he was a variable in an equation too ancient to solve. "Salith," he said softly, "back home people joke to break tension. It doesn't always mean we want what we say." She turned, silver eyes reflecting the galaxy above. "And yet," she said, "here you are." That night, as he lay awake, the palace's breathing grew louder, like a giant heartbeat. A thought crept unbidden. Maybe the palace wasn't just alive, it was listening. It might even be judging. He wondered what it whispered to its sovereign about him. Outside his chamber, faint footsteps approached. The door slid open without sound, and Salith stepped inside. "You are restless," she said simply. "So are you," he replied. She approached the balcony, gazing out at the endless stars. "My people watch to see if I will break tradition for a human. They hope you will fail, so they may call me merciful for undoing the vow. But if you endure—" She looked back at him. "Then everything changes." "That's a lot of pressure for a guy who just wanted to tell a joke," he said lightly. She laughed, soft but real. "Perhaps that is why the cosmos chose you." When she left, he stood there for a long time, staring into the void beyond the glass. Maybe this was how humanity always found its place, by accident, by humor, by stubbornness. A single careless sentence had entwined two empires. Now somehow he had to make it mean something. The palace lights dimmed, as if acknowledging his resolve. And in the echo of distant stars, he could almost hear Salith's laughter lingering like the first hint of dawn. The third sunrise in the very dominion came not, with light but with sound, a harmonic resonance that thrummed through the palace like a pulse through stone. Ryan woke to it, disoriented, feeling the vibration in his bones. It wasn't unpleasant, just alien, a deep, thrumming note that reminded him of whale song or the breathing of a great machine. He sat up, glancing around his quarters as threads of light formed shifting symbols on the walls. His translator implant translated only fragments. "Union confirmed," Covenant observed. "Divergence detected," he frowned. "Divergence? That couldn't be good." Before he could ask anyone, the doors slid open and Salith entered, fully armored, her expression tight but not cold. "You are summoned," she said. "The council has questions. About you and about us." They walked together through the echoing halls, every step measured, every breath heavy with expectation. Ryan noticed how the guards' eyes followed him, not with hostility exactly, but with something more dangerous, curiosity edged with superstition. To them, he wasn't just a foreigner. He was a variable in prophecy. Salith must have sensed his unease because she said softly, "They believe our bond has altered the pattern. The Dominion records every vibration of history and resonance. Our frequencies are merging." "Meaning?" he asked. "Meaning," she said. "Our world now hums in a human key." He almost laughed at the absurdity, but her grave tone silenced him. "Is that bad?" he asked. "To some," she said. "To others, revolutionary." The council chamber this time felt less like a hall and more like a storm. Nobles shimmered in their veils of living light, the air thick with murmured energy. When Salith stepped into the center, the floor rippled, reacting to her presence. Ryan followed, resisting the urge to fidget. An elder noble with a crown of vibrating metal leaned forward. "Your Majesty," she intoned, "the Covenant has disrupted the planetary resonance. The archives of breath have recorded anomalies. This human," her gaze speared Ryan, "has no harmonic lineage. He is noise." A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Salith raised her hand. "Noise is the beginning of all music," she said calmly. "Without dissonance there is no evolution. Without order," another noble countered, "there is chaos. We cannot allow a species of impermanence to infect the divine frequencies." Ryan's fists clenched. "I'm right here," he said. "If you want to accuse me of something, use words, not poetry." The nobles gasped at the interruption, scandalized. Salith's lips twitched, half amusement, half warning. "He speaks as humans do," she said. "Directly. It is refreshing." The debate escalated, voices blending into a haunting polyphonic storm. Ryan barely understood half of it, but he caught enough. Factions forming, accusations of blasphemy, whispers of a coming test. Finally, Salith raised both hands and silence fell. "Then let there be a measure," she said. "The right of accord. If the Covenant is true, it will withstand resonance alignment. If false, the sound will unmake itself." The nobles bowed in acceptance, though many looked eager for the outcome. Ryan turned to her as the crowd dispersed. "A test?" he asked. "What does that mean?" "It means we stand before the world's heart," she said, "and let it decide whether our bond is harmony or error." That night she brought him to the core of breath, a chamber deep beneath the palace, older than any empire. The air shimmered with unseen power. In the center hovered a vast crystal sphere, slowly rotating, threads of light weaving through it like veins. "This is the resonant core," Salith said quietly. "It sings the universe into continuity. Every being, every thought, every vow has its echo here. Ryan stared, awestruck. "And if it rejects me?" "Then the sound will end," she said simply. "For one of us." His stomach dropped. "You mean it could kill you?" "A bond is mutual," she said. "Its failure belongs to both." The ritual began at dawn. They stood on twin platforms suspended over the core, surrounded by concentric rings of floating glyphs. Salith extended her hands toward him, palms glowing faintly. "Do not resist the pull," she said. "It must hear your truth." "My truth?" he said. "I barely know what's happening." "Then speak what you know." The sphere flared, light pouring from it like liquid sunrise. A vibration filled the air, rising until his teeth ached. He felt it tugging at his chest, his breath sinking to her rhythm. Suddenly he could hear her thoughts, not words but emotions rendered as sound. Centuries of solitude, duty hardened into ritual, a yearning she had never admitted. He gasped. "You're lonely." The light around her pulsed brighter. "And you are afraid," her voice echoed not through the air but through his mind. "Afraid of meaning too much." The resonance grew unbearable, then shifted, like two notes finding each other. The sphere's light turned golden, the glyphs dissolving into waves of color. The ground beneath them trembled, and suddenly Ryan understood. The core wasn't testing them, it was learning. He saw flashes of Earth, humanity's laughter, music, chaos, hope. The core responded with matching tones, weaving fragments of human emotion into its symphony. When it finally stilled, the silence was absolute. Then a single tone rang out, pure, steady, beautiful. Salith's eyes widened. "It accepts you," she whispered. "No," Ryan said softly. "It accepts us." Afterward, they emerged from the depths to find the palace transformed. The walls no longer shimmered only with alien light. Now they pulsed with subtle hues of human color, warm oranges, soft blues, colors that spoke of oceans and sunsets. The attendants watched in stunned reverence. "The Dominion hums differently now," Salith said. "Your presence has rewritten its breath." "You say that like it's a good thing." "It is," she said. "But it will not go unchallenged." Her words proved prophetic. Within days, resistance grew. Entire colonies of the Dominion began refusing resonance alignment, declaring the Covenant heresy. Ryan read intercepted transmissions with growing dread, rumors of rebellion, whispers that the Queen had been corrupted by human impermanence. When he confronted Salith, she listened in silence, then said, "Change invites fear. You cannot unmake it by retreating." "They might kill you," he said. "Or both of us." "Then let them learn," she replied, "that the heart cannot be silenced by decree." He stared at her, incredulous. "You'd risk everything for this?" "Not everything," she said. "Just everything worth keeping." That night the first attack came. Explosions shook the outer spires, and alarms wailed like dying stars. Salith's guards rushed to their posts as the palace sealed itself. Through the window, Ryan saw ships rising from the lower city, very vessels firing on their own. He turned to her. "We need to get you out." "No," she said. "We end this here." She drew her blade, a slender weapon of light that hummed like a heartbeat. "You brought humanity's chaos," she said. "Now show me how your kind survives it." "You don't want to see that," he said grimly. She smiled. "I already do." They fought their way through corridors alive with shifting light, side by side, human reflex and alien grace intertwined. Every strike of her blade was a song. Every shot from his weapon was rhythm. Somewhere amid the chaos, he realized they moved in perfect synchrony. She glanced at him once amid the fire and sound, and for the first time her gaze held no regal distance, only trust. When the final wave fell and the palace fell silent again, the air crackled with ozone and ash. Salith lowered her weapon. "Perhaps," she said, breathing hard, "your kind is not noise after all." Ryan smiled through exhaustion. "Told you. We are more of a remix." The fires from the rebellion still burned on the horizon when dawn finally broke, painting the palace domes in shifting gold. Smoke curled upward into the false sky, an artificial atmosphere maintained by orbital mirrors, and for the first time since arriving, Ryan understood what it meant to be at the center of a living empire, on the brink of tearing itself apart. The world of the Very sang beneath his feet, but its melody was fractured. Every pulse in the palace walls felt uneven now, uncertain. He stood beside Salith on the balcony overlooking the spires, wind whipping through his hair as ships drifted in distant silence. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "They're regrouping." Saleth's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "They cannot accept that harmony has changed key. But change always finds its next breath." She turned to him, and for a heartbeat, the Empress's composure slipped, revealing exhaustion etched deep into her eyes. "I cannot lose this, Ryan, not to fear, not to history." Below them, the courtyards were filled with wounded citizens, Veery soldiers, attendants, even children whose homes had been caught in the tremors. Ryan descended the steps, pushing through the haze until he reached a small girl kneeling beside her fallen guardian. The child's skin shimmered faintly, her tears glowing like liquid starlight. "She won't wake," the girl whispered, not realizing his translator had already bridged the words. Ryan crouched beside her, checking the faint rhythm in the woman's chest. "Alive, but barely." The medics nearby had their hands full. He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound, guiding the girl's trembling hands. "Hold it here," he said softly. "Don't let go." Her eyes widened, reflecting his face as though memorizing it. "You're the human," she said. "The one who changed the songs." He hesitated. "Maybe," he said, "but you'll be the one who keeps them going." When he looked up, Saleth was watching from the balcony above, something unreadable flickering in her expression. Later, in the council chamber turned command center, Saleth and her generals gathered around a holographic map of the Dominion's core systems. Red nodes pulsed across the projection. Rebellious colonies, splinter fleets, communication blackouts. "They move faster than our defenses can adapt," one general said. "They use the old harmonics, pre-ascension codes." Saleth's tone remained calm. "Then adapt faster. If they cling to the old frequencies, we build new ones." She turned to Ryan. "Humans are inventors of chaos. How do your people fight when logic fails?" He stared at the hologram, tracing movement patterns. "We improvise," he said. "We find what the enemy expects and do the opposite." "Improvisation," she repeated, as if tasting the concept. "An art of defiance." "More like desperation," he said. "But it works," she smiled faintly. "Then desperation may yet save us." They devised a plan born of impossible odds, used the palace itself, the resonant core beneath it, as a broadcasting beacon. If they could merge human irregularity into the harmonic network, they might destabilize the rebels' synchronized attacks. It was reckless. It was untested. It was very human. Saleth listened to his outline in silence, then said, "If this fails, the palace collapses." "If we do nothing," he replied, "the Dominion does." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then let us gamble." The following hours were a blur of preparation. Engineers linked conduits, scribes etched runes into metal, and Rian worked alongside them, translating Earth's most primitive communication algorithms, chaotic waveforms, randomized bursts, into the Veery system. The irony wasn't lost on him, humanity's noise becoming salvation. When the sequence began, the palace shuddered. The walls glowed, the floor vibrated, and deep below, the resonant core awakened once more. Saleth stood at the center, her palms outstretched, light coiling around her like smoke. Ryan fed input from a terminal, his breath quick and shallow. "Signal alignment at 40%, he called out. "We're holding." "Increase resonance flow," she commanded. "No," he said quickly. "Too much and it'll—" The chamber exploded with light. He was thrown backward, crashing against the railing. For a moment, everything vanished into blinding sound, then silence. He blinked through the haze. Saleth stood still. The core dimmed behind her, its once golden glow flickering erratically. "Did it work?" he asked, coughing. "Listen," she said. From somewhere deep within the planet, a low vibration rose, not discordant, not pure, but alive. The holographic map reappeared, red nodes flickering and fading one by one. "They're withdrawing," a voice said. Saleth exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "You have remade the Song of the Dominion," she said. Ryan leaned heavily on the console. "We did." But before he could savor the relief, alarms screamed anew. The floor split with a thunderous crack. Energy surged through the conduits, wild and uncontrolled. "The core's destabilizing," he shouted. "We overloaded it." The air tore with light, and Saleth's voice cut through the chaos. "Get out!" But he didn't move. He sprinted toward the main control array, fingers flying across alien glyphs, trying to reroute power. "Ryan!" she shouted. "You'll die!" "Maybe," he said, "but so will you if I don't." He found the sequence, a failsafe buried in the resonance matrix, but it required a manual link, an interface between organic and synthetic. "You can't," Salith said, realizing what he meant. "It will burn your mind." "You said empathy is architecture," he replied. "Guess it's time to test the foundation." He pressed his palm to the crystalline console. Pain shot through him, raw and electric, as alien data screamed through his nervous system. He felt the planet's heartbeat, its pulse out of rhythm, its desperate need for balance. Then he felt her hand over his, anchoring him. Their thoughts collided, his chaos, her order, human noise and alien melody intertwining. Together, they forced the resonance into harmony. The chamber blazed white. When the light faded, silence reigned. He woke to dimness and the faint hum of recovery systems. The air smelled of ozone and ash. Salith knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. "You lived," she said quietly. "Barely," he croaked. "What happened?" "The core stabilized," she said. "The Dominion sings again." She hesitated, brushing a hand across his brow. "You burned part of your mind into the resonance. You are now part of our world's memory." He tried to smile. "Guess that makes me hard to forget." She looked away, voice soft. "No ruler forgets the one who saves her world by nearly dying in her hands." Days passed. The rebellion fractured, the loyalists rallied, and the Dominion began to rebuild. Yet in the quiet aftermath, new uncertainties emerged. The resonance now carried traces of humanity, irregular, unpredictable, beautiful. Some saw it as divine evolution, others as contamination. When Salith addressed her people from the Grand Hall, Ryan stood behind her, still weak but alive. "The Covenant has been tested by fire and sound," she said to the assembled nobles. "And it endures. Let no one say the stars demand perfection. Even the universe began with noise." The chamber fell silent before erupting into applause, hesitant then genuine. Ryan felt something shift in that moment. Acceptance, maybe, or the beginning of it. That night, the two of them stood once more in the suspended garden, beneath drifting petals that glowed in faint light. "You changed them," he said quietly. "No," she said. "We changed each other." She turned to him, closer now than she had ever allowed herself before. "When you spoke your joke, I thought you were mocking me. But perhaps you were summoning something neither of us understood." He met her gaze, and the distance between their worlds dissolved. "Maybe we were both just trying to make each other laugh." Her smile was soft, human in a way it had never been. "Then laughter is the new language of gods." He laughed despite everything, the exhaustion, the scars, the chaos. And for the first time her laughter joined his, weaving through the air like the first breath of a new dawn. Night returned to the Dominion as quiet as the breath before sleep. The stars beyond the palace windows glimmered like patient witnesses, watching the world they had nearly lost. Ryan stood on the balcony of the upper spire, the cool wind tugging gently at his collar. The scars on his hands, residual burns from the resonance overload, glowed faintly in the moonlight. He flexed them, marveling at how something so small could carry the echo of an entire civilization's heartbeat. The air still hummed faintly, as though the planet itself was remembering the song they had forced back into harmony. Behind him he heard the soft rhythm of approaching footsteps, light as a sigh. Salith joined him, her robe whispering like woven light. "It's quiet," she said, voice low. "Too quiet for my people. We are used to the world singing to us. Silence feels like aftermath." He smiled faintly. "On Earth we call that peace." She leaned against the railing beside him, her eyes tracing the horizon where ash clouds dissolved into stars. "Peace," she murmured, as though testing the shape of the word. "Is that what you call it when you survive?" "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes it's just the pause before we start arguing again." Her laughter came softly, but it carried warmth. "Your kind's defiance fascinates me. You make war into art and chaos into meaning. Even your failures breathe." He turned to her. "And you make meaning into order until it stops breathing. Maybe that's why we fit." Her silver gaze met his, steady and luminous, her perfect dissonance. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled not with distance but understanding. Beneath them, the city's faint luminescence pulsed once more, a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat recovering. In the following days, Ryan watched the Dominion begin to rebuild, not just its structures but its faith. The nobles who once whispered curses now approached him with cautious curiosity. Engineers sought his input on integrating human technology into resonance circuits. Children followed him in the streets, laughing when he showed them how to whistle through cupped hands. The palace, once cold and sacred, now thrummed with voices. Saelith presided over the council from her throne of light, her presence as commanding as ever, yet subtly changed. When she spoke of unity now, her words carried not decree but invitation. "Harmony," she said in one address, "is not sameness. It is the courage to remain different without breaking." Rian, listening from the shadows, realized she had begun to sound almost human. And perhaps he thought that was the real revolution, but peace never arrives without cost. The resonance storms left deep scars on the planet's crust, and the core's pulse grew unpredictable. Scientists warned that human patterns, emotionally charged, non-linear, had altered the harmonic stability of the Dominion. Ryan spent long hours in the lower labs, helping recalibrate sensors, while Saelith navigated the political backlash above. One evening he found her standing before the core again, alone, the massive sphere flickering faintly. "You shouldn't be here without a guard," he said. She smiled without turning. "The core does not harm those who listen." "You're worried," he said. "It's fading. It's adapting," she corrected softly. "But yes, it feels tired. As though it has lived too much too quickly." He stepped closer. "Like us." That made her laugh, and for a fleeting moment, she rested her forehead against the glowing surface. The sphere pulsed, recognizing her touch. "It remembers you," she whispered. "Both of us." The following weeks brought strange phenomena. Across the Dominion, people began reporting dreams in which human voices spoke their ancient hymns, and humans aboard the diplomatic ships orbiting the system reported hearing the very harmonics faintly in their dreams. The core's fusion of frequencies had created something new, a bridge of thought between species. When Saelith told him, Ryan stared at her in disbelief. "You mean we're connected across dreams?" "Not all," she said. "Only those who feel deeply. Empathy has become its own language." He shook his head, half in wonder, half in fear. "We've turned telepathy into emotion sharing." "You say that as though it's dangerous." "It is," he said. "We barely understand ourselves. Now we're inside each other's hearts." Saelith's gaze softened. "Perhaps that is what the stars intended when they let us meet. Not conquest, understanding, or madness," he muttered. "They're usually the same thing." That night, as he prepared to leave the Dominion temporarily to report to the United Coalition, Saelith met him in the hangar bay. Her armor shimmered faintly, but her crown was gone. She had come not as Empress, but as herself. "You will return," she said. It wasn't a question. "If I'm not banned from intergalactic diplomacy forever," he said with a grin. "They'll think I seduced a queen." "Did you?" she asked, her tone playful but her eyes serious. "Maybe you seduced me," he said. "Or maybe it was mutual stupidity." She smiled, and the air between them tightened, charged. "Then let it be sacred stupidity." She reached out, pressing a small crystalline pendant into his hand. It glowed faintly with her world's resonance. "When you feel alone," she said, "this will hum with my breath." He closed his fingers around it. "And when you're tired of ruling gods and galaxies, listen for the off-key note. That'll be me." The journey back to human space felt shorter than it should have, yet even surrounded by familiar machinery and voices, Rian could still hear faint echoes of Veri harmonics, whispering in the ship's hull. When he addressed the coalition, he spoke not of treaties or resources, but of what he had seen, an empire that measured time in sound, a queen who understood silence, and a moment when a joke bridged galaxies. "We thought humanity's strength was survival," he told them, "but it's not. It's connection. We laugh, we misunderstand, we stumble, and somehow that keeps the universe from freezing." The council chamber fell silent. One by one, the representatives began to hum softly, a human imitation of the Veri tone he demonstrated. It was imperfect, clumsy, and utterly beautiful. For the first time, he believed peace might be possible. Months later, when he returned to the Dominion, the palace welcomed him not with ceremony but with music. The very walls hummed in greeting, and Saelith stood waiting at the grand hall's center. "You kept your promise," she said. "You kept breathing," he replied. She gestured to the hall where humans and Veri mingled freely, their voices weaving strange harmonies. "Our worlds are learning to sing together." He walked to her side, watching as a human child taught a Veri youth to skip stones across a shallow, luminous pool. "Not bad for a misunderstanding," he said. She looked at him then, the weight of centuries softened by something fragile and new. Perhaps all creation begins with a misunderstanding. The air shimmered faintly, the planet's heartbeat steady once more. "And what are we now?" he asked quietly. "An unfinished song," she said, "but one worth hearing." That night, beneath the stars they both claimed now as home, Ryan found himself standing once more in the suspended garden. The petals drifted lazily through the air, glowing faintly in hues neither human nor Veri could name. Seilith joined him, silent, her hand finding his without ceremony. The hum of the world rose around them, a resonance not perfect but alive. "You never told me why you said yes," he said. "Oh, when I joked," she smiled, eyes glinting like mercury. "Because you were the first creature who spoke to me, as if I were not divine. You called me a wife, not a queen. I wanted to know what that meant." "And did you?" "Not yet," she said, "but I enjoy learning." They stood there as the stars aligned overhead, the core pulsing faintly beneath the planet's surface, carrying their intertwined voices into eternity. In the end, it had started with laughter, and perhaps Ryan thought the universe had been waiting for humanity to remind it how to laugh again.